Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Miles. You're tuning in at X-Rays, where knowledge meets inspiration in the intricate dance of industry evolution. I'm back for another conversation that will make you pause and rethink what value actually means in modern organizations. If you've been with us for a while, today's guest needs no long introduction, but of course, we'll give him one anyway, because he consistently challenges organizations to stop ticking boxes and start building capability. Someone who believes value doesn't come from systems alone, it comes from the people using them. This is his 68th episode with us, which honestly says a lot. I'm really pleased to welcome back the Managing Director and CEO of ACI Global and e-Quip, Ian Erskine. Hi, Ian. How have you been?
Hi again, Miles, and welcome back. And I trust you and your family are well and you had a wonderful weekend. And also to all our viewers, welcome back. And also, I hope you also had a wonderful weekend and concentrating on that $86,400. No, we made seconds in the day.
Yes, I
And
love that.
yeah, I often think back about that. And I remember seeing that come across, I think it came across on one of my LinkedIn feeds. And I picked up on it because it reminds you to, as I said on our last podcast, it reminds you when you get out of bed, make sure you get out of bed with a plan to
Mhm.
exhaust everything that you want to do in that day so that you start afresh again the next day. And I think it's a very telling message.
Yes, a very good reminder, Ian, and I love that. So today it's all about creation of value, specifically how organizations can move beyond profit metrics and certification checklists. Instead, create value through people development, engagement, and not to forget, accelerating continuous improvement or ACI. And when people hear the phrase value creation, Ian, most of us immediately think revenue, growth, or margins. But your work takes a much broader view, I'm sure. So, from your perspective, what does real value creation actually look like for organizations today beyond just the financials?
Well, you'll hear this probably throughout the podcast and ongoing as we move forward on our journey that businesses are just not like a blank canvas and a mundane apparatus. Systems, business systems, which most organisations embrace as putting them in to add value to the organisations, but often it comes about where I'll sit down with the organisation and generally over a 2 or 3 day audit, the majority of the time spent at the audit is spent interviewing, talking to people, ensuring that their training is up to date, the verification, the validation of their skills and their tasks are being monitored. And that's where the importance is. And that's where we talk about people development engagement, which is key.
Mm-hmm.
And this is to strive for higher achievers through accelerating continuous improvement in ACI, as you mentioned before. And this is not just for meeting key personal performance indicators, KPPIs, but beating them and ensuring your organisation achieves ongoing sustained success with people involvement, because that sustained success, obviously, you're aiming to lead to financial success. But if you don't have your full team on board, all rowing the boat at the same rhythm, ultimately that does not happen. And look, I think in Australia today, I think there was some alarming number of small businesses last year actually went bankrupt or closed their doors. 80,000 small businesses. And look, I know businesses conditions are tough, but I employ everyone to just have a look at their people that are involved and make sure that they are fully tuned to the business's vision and its mission, and encourage the people of the organisation to become high achievers, because that way it's not just yourself carrying the burden as a small business. Everyone is rowing the boat with you. And I
Uh-huh.
think that is key.
Yeah. And it's obviously a chain reaction.
Yes. And, you often heard me talk about it, ACI, Accelerating Continuous Improvement. And this has to involve your people. And this way, if the involvement and engagement and development of your people is ongoing, it
Mhm.
becomes a journey of high success. And that's
Mhm.
where you get your sustained success.
Yeah, right. And that value isn't just what shows up in a report, it's what shows up in people's performance, confidence, and mindset every single day. And once leaders start seeing value through that wider lens and understands that value is about people and not just outcomes, and the big question becomes execution, Ian. How do you help organizations turn good intentions into value that's actually felt by employees, by clients, and by stakeholders through developing high achievers and future ready leaders?
Yeah, well, see, it's interesting. And again, you often hear me talk about the experiences that I have with my organisations that I'm working with. And,
Mhm.
and quite often, the concentration is on talking about the management system standards, the quality standard, the environmental standard, the health and safety standard, corporate governance, GRI guidelines, and things like that. But again, I often remind them in reference to two very important standards. That's the ISO 10015
Mhm.
and the 10018 standards, which talk about engagement and development of your people. Now, they're very clear and concise documents, but that's something that ACI Global over the past 2 to 4 years, we've stepped back and we've actually embraced both those standards. And that leads to our path from starting the learning journey to the ultimate awarding of the certificate and ID cards, ISO personal certification. And that's what the ISO personal certification by ACI Global Certification, which is a division of ACI Global,
Mhm.
that's basically where it all ends up. But the icing or the cream on the cake, so to speak, is that once the certification of the people is achieved, ultimately then the business can actually, hand on heart, go to a certification body and say, guys, we are ready to be certified. And obviously that's an additional cost, but what the organisation is able to do is there's no additional consultancy fees. It's all in-house. And that's what makes it oh so important, because the training that we provide to our candidates always involves an active organisation, more often than not their own, right?
Mhm.
And that way it becomes really meaningful. And like we said, it builds future ready leaders so that they can take the extreme conditions or crashes that may happen.
Mhm.
Because as you know, one of the most important things in life is being able to handle change,
Yeah.
because it doesn't matter what you do. There
Mhm.
will be things that will come. And again, I'll give you a real life example of that, what happened on Monday. I was going
Okay.
to come, I was going to come into the city by train yesterday, but anyway, very early in the morning, I had a text come through, and the rail system had been shut down because someone had gone to one of the train stations near to where I get on the train and stolen a whole heap of the copper that powers the lines.
Mhm.
So the trains were shut down. So I said, okay, so I'll have to think of a different way to do it. And anyway, it was compounded ultimately by my client became very ill. So we had to actually have to do it by phone. But that's fine.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's just showing an ability where you can adapt, you can manage change, you can put things in place. And in actual fact, it's turned out quite well. I'll be talking
Mhm.
to the client after we finish our podcast, because she's still not very well. And but she'll get through the audit and everything will be fine.
Mm-hmm. Right. Being resilient and
Yes.
having the ability to adapt or adjust. Very good one. And I really like how practical that is. It takes value out of theory and puts it straight into how people work, learn, and grow inside the business. And that naturally brings us to the role people play in the whole system, Ian. You often say that people are more than just part of the system, they are the system. So, could you tell us how investing in competence, skills, and capability through people development, engagement, and ACI Global certification directly shapes long term sustainable value?
Okay, so this is an interesting one because, again, we mentioned it a little bit, just a little bit before, but it goes back to our whole process, and it's all people focused. And that people focus is then married together with the organisation. So
Mhm,
the training is actually done by the candidate within an organisational context. So we don't use virtual classrooms or have a instructor standing up in front of a classroom or a meeting room. And worst of all, there's no such thing as an AI chatbot doing the learning. It's
mhm,
all hands-on, but again, the real significance of the training is that it's all done by an industry and ISO expert within that topic that the candidate's doing, right?
mhm,
And again, to top it off, right at the end, is that we then finish that off with the issuing of ISO certification and its
mhm.
real base certification, because that certification by ACI Global Certification is actually based on the organisation's systems. So again, you get that marry up between the system and the organisation's people. So
Right.
you get that uptake because quite often I will go into an organisation and they say, oh, yes, we've had a consultant here for the last 12 months, spent X plus X plus X amount of dollars. And, I'll look around the room and on the shelves there's a whole heap of manuals and so forth,
Mhm.
which is a red flag for me.
Yeah.
And anyway, we'll sit down and start talking about it. And quite often, it doesn't take long to find where you can see where the organisation hasn't really married up what the consultant's been putting in for them, because basically it's a buy off the shelf and they think that it will work. But
Yeah.
systems, as I said, and you know this yourself, systems don't work that way. They only work with people involvement. And
Yes.
that's what our whole process is built on. And it's built on, again, those two standards where we talk about engagement and
Mhm,
development of an organisation's people from top to bottom. And
mhm.
that's, again, that's something that we also do very differently. And that's something that Marcus has been able to bring on board is we look at the very top. So we actually provide training for the directors as well.
Yes.
Okay. And that could be, for argument's sake, ensuring that you've got all your licenses up to date, your asset
Mhm.
registrations and business registrations. But above all, one of the critical issues that we often talk about is the owner of the business, their primary duty of care. So
Mhm.
their primary duty of care is to ensure the whole business runs and they are responsible for every single one of their employees, right?
Mhm.
But also then going down to the supervisors and the other employees, they also have to be responsible and understand there's a primary duty of care there for them as well,
Mhm.
right? And again, you've heard me mention many times in reference to, for argument's sake, fatigue. It's up to yourself to be actually able, when you get out of bed and say, no, look, I just don't feel well enough to go to work, you have to pick up the phone, make a
Yeah.
call and say, look, I can't come in today,
Mhm.
right? And the business ultimately will support you. In actual fact, by law, they do have to support you.
Yes.
But basically, all businesses have that communication and that empathy between the employers and themselves, that they
Mhm.
understand that, look, if someone's not well, obviously don't come into work. We'll still support you, right? Because if you do try to go to work and you're fatigued, there is a chance that you can have an accident and you can
Right.
injure not only yourself but others.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's where this whole what we're talking about, engagement and development of people comes in, because that ultimately again ties in very well with ACI Global's mantra of accelerating continuous improvement, future ready leadership, targets that we put in place for every single person that we train, key personal performance indicators, and above all, ensuring that people have that enthusiasm to keep
Mhm.
driving to become high achievers and higher achievers. Because
Exactly.
if you don't have that enthusiasm, you're not going to get that continuous improvement, or
Mhm.
what we call accelerating continuous improvement of the systems, of the business itself. And ultimately, that's how organisations that embrace ACI are able to really nail both their vision and their mission and achieve ultra sustained success.
Mhm. And that's an essential cycle. It reframes certification as something that supports people rather than something people have to work around. And of course, once you start investing in people, the next challenge is knowing whether it's actually working, right? So, a lot of organizations struggle here. Measuring value often turns into a tick the box exercise, especially around management systems. How should leaders be thinking about measurement in a way that reflects real performance, engagement, and long-term impact rather than, a tick the box exercise for management system certification?
Um, yeah, well, see, this is just a simple matter of putting measurement in place for capability skills, right? And even, measure the enthusiasm of your employees when they come to work. If your
Mhm.
employees come to work looking sad, grumpy, not talkative, there's something adrift there. And quite often, if it's not addressed, issues can arise from that very thing. So, even enthusiasm needs to be measured. And it's a very simple process. When people first walk in the door, say hi, be observant. And again, this is your communication skills. Note how they greet you, right? Because it doesn't take long to realise if someone's come to work and they're not happy, they're sitting at their desk, they're grumpy, they're not as talkative, they're not,
Uh-huh.
happy. And this is where leaders, and again, we talk about future-proof leadership. This is where we do future-proof our leaders by simply saying you've got to be active all the time in your leadership roles,
Mhm.
observing, communicating, and this is why you must measure all these key parameters within the working cycle. And that's what we've done within e-Quip. We've built these measures within e-Quip where senior managers can measure the tasks that their people are doing at various times. And that
Mhm.
way you ensure that they're not just meeting their KPIs, they're actually beating their KPIs.
Mhm.
Because when it's all said and done, that's what a organisation needs to be looking at, is that you're just not merely moving from one step to the other, to the other, to the other, and making a reasonable profit. What you should be doing is looking to actually make high profits so that you can return those profits back to your people, right?
Mhm.
And then with the enthusiasm of your employees, you may be looking at doing something different with your business, adding extra value to the business,
Mhm.
right? So
Right.
taking on extra skills, taking on extra jobs, and things like that. And this is where it's oh so important to measure capability and reward that capability with meritocracy.
Mhm.
Because obviously, if people are working hard, they're achieving their targets, in fact, they're beating their targets,
Mhm.
that's where, as an owner, you're always happy to say, wow, you've done far better than I would have ever expected, probably not even that you expected. So
Mhm.
you then reward them accordingly. And
Yes.
that's how you get a very, very robust, um, almost bulletproof workforce, because they can take the knocks when they come,
Mhm.
because they want to take the knocks, because
Right.
they want the business to succeed.
Yeah, and that's the kind of workforce everybody would love, I'm sure. And I couldn't agree more with you, Ian. Measuring enthusiasm and capability feels far more useful than just measuring whether a process exists on paper. So when all of this come together, people, engagement, continuous improvement, and when organizations genuinely embed value creation through ACI into how they operate, what kind of competitive advantage do you see emerging, especially compared to organizations still relying purely on systems and certification as benchmarks?
Well, this is probably the telling point because many organisations lose sight of the fact that whilst certification through management system was a benchmark, right? Well, this now is not the case because in actual fact now there's been with the rapid rise of new technologies, if we're not careful, systems will cease to add value unless the organisation steps back, has a look at their people and say, wow, we now need to really focus on our people's strengths,
Mhm.
but above all, look at their weaknesses, right? Because when, again, experience tells me one of the most important things to do with your people is look at their strengths and and turn those strengths into positives for each of their people.
Yeah.
Because people's strengths will generally remain strong because you're working constantly to become a high achiever, high achiever. But if you just accept that you've got a weakness and carry that weakness, ultimately that will become a drag.
Mhm.
So that's where the engagement of people, the development of people becomes oh so important. And you look at their goals and you ask them, what would you like to, where would you like to be in the next 5 years? And sometimes this can be a challenge to the owner of the business because they may come back and say, well, actually, what I would like to do, Ian, I would like to actually run a training company. I'd actually like to own a training company.
Mhm.
So you've got to be big enough and understand, wow, he may take over another company and may be one of my competitors. Well, all well and good. But isn't that a great thing that the person that you have with you has that goal to be a super high achiever, to run their own business? So that's where you become involved in their training, improving their KPIs and their performance, right? And this is where, again, you measure that engagement. You measure the way the development of each of your people is coming through, and you measure that and award that with ISO personal certification, right? And then ISO personal recertification. So every 3 years, every employee is recertified. And this is how you get that ongoing engagement and development of your workforce.
Mhm. What a powerful way to look at it. We really always have to feel that thirst to improve and be better than the person we were yesterday, because it really positions people engagement and, as you said, future ready leadership as the differentiator, not the paperwork. And value creation is really something that you build day by day through people. And for anyone leading teams right now, that's a pretty encouraging message from you, Ian. So thank you so much
Yes.
for sharing such clear, grounded insights today, especially around people focus, high achievers, and future ready leadership. Thank you, Ian.
Yes, but just before we finish up, I'd just like to re-emphasize the fact that uh, and we all need to be aware of it. We all need to be aware that we shouldn't be frightened of technology. Okay.
Yes.
We shouldn't be frightened of embracing technology and modern software systems. But what I'm trying to stress in everything, and what I've tried to stress, or we have tried to stress today, is there has to be a people focus within that technology and that software. Because software, like systems, don't just simply work by themselves. Now,
Mhm.
I have heard where people are saying, oh, yes, but we can automate that decision. Yes, you can automate that decision, But at all times, you must have human oversight in that process to ensure that that automated decision or process is acting correctly.
Yes.
Okay, so that's one of the most important points I want to just re-emphasize in reference to what we're talking about here is the focus of people
Mhm.
within a business and their systems.
Yes. Thank you for that reminder, Ian, and thank you for being here.
Yes, and thank you so much to yourself, Miles, and all our viewers.
It's a pleasure always. So, for those watching or listening who want to learn more about ACI Global and e-Quip and how to better develop and engage your people, we'll include links to ACI Global and e-Quip below so you can explore further or reach out directly. Thank you for spending your time with us. Until next time, this has been your host, Miles, with Ian, reminding you to stay focused, driven, and inspired with X-Raced.